Most guys learn the hard way that the dating game isn't what they were told. You grow up being told that showing up, being consistent, opening up emotionally, and communicating clearly is what women want. You follow that script, you care, you check in, you stay available, and what happens? Nothing. She loses interest, pulls away, starts texting less. Meanwhile, the guy who doesn't give a damn, who doesn't say much, who forgets to reply for hours or even days, he's all she talks about. The one who barely puts in effort suddenly lives rent-free in her head. You start wondering, what am I doing wrong? You're showing love the way they said love should be shown, honestly, openly, consistently. But instead of appreciation, you get ghosted, breadcrumbed, or left on read. Here's where it gets real. She's not pulled by words, effort, or security, not at first. She's pulled by contrast, unpredictability, emotional spikes. It's not logical, it's neurological. The brain doesn't crave what's obvious, it obsesses over what's uncertain. And that guy who barely texts back, who shares almost nothing, he creates a mental vacuum, and her mind rushes to fill it, imagining what he's doing, fantasizing about what he feels, hoping the silence means he's deep, not disinterested. She builds a story around a person she doesn't even know, not because he's shown her anything extraordinary, but because she's been left to dream up the rest. And dreams often look better than reality. The guy who's always there, over time he turns invisible, fully known, predictable, safe. And in the beginning, safe doesn't trigger chemistry. Safe doesn't light up the receptors in her brain that register novelty or risk. Safe doesn't drive late-night overthinking. The attraction system doesn't respond to doing everything right. It responds to feeling something unforgettable. And you don't feel unforgettable by being endlessly accessible. She doesn't chase the man who floods her with attention because there's nothing to chase. He's already given himself completely. There's no space to wonder, no silence to interpret, no mystery to unravel. And without those things, attraction doesn't grow, it stalls. Meanwhile, the other guy, he's done and said almost nothing, but every little action from him, every rare text, every short call, every brief moment of interest hits like a shock to the system. Why? Because it's rare, it's spaced out. It has emotional weight, not because of depth, but because of contrast. Eyes followed by nothing. Presence followed by silence. That emotional swing becomes addictive. Not because he's better, but because he triggers something primal. And here's the real kicker, she isn't even in love with him. She's addicted to what he makes her feel. He disrupts her emotional rhythm. He's not a man, he's a mental loop. And once she's caught in that loop, even the man who quietly stood by with love and loyalty fades into background noise. Attraction doesn't grow in flatness. It grows in peaks and valleys. When you're showing up the same way every single day, texting good morning, checking in at lunch, calling before bed, you're creating emotional stability. And yeah, stability matters in a long-term relationship. But in the beginning, it puts desire to sleep. There's no spike, no unpredictability. Just a flat emotional line that feels more like friendship than fire. Now compare that to the guy who shows up randomly. He texts out of nowhere after 3 days of silence. He's present for an intense conversation, then vanishes again. He's affectionate one moment, distant the next. What's happening in her brain? Chaos. And chaos, when it comes from someone she's attracted to, doesn't repel her. It locks her in. Every time he reappears after going quiet, her nervous system spikes, relief mixed with excitement, a hit of dopamine she wasn't sure she'd get. That neurological reaction is powerful, way more powerful than the comfort of knowing you'll always be there. Because comfort doesn't create obsession, uncertainty does. When she doesn't know if he'll text back, every message from him feels like a win. When she doesn't know if he's thinking about her, she starts thinking about him constantly. Her mind fills the gaps with meaning that isn't even there. She replays the last thing he said. She overanalyzes his tone. She wonders what changed, what she did, what he's feeling. And all that mental energy? That's investment. She's not doing that with the guy who's always available. There's nothing to question, nothing to decode. He's an open book, and open books don't keep you up at night. This is the addiction cycle most people don't talk about. Inconsistent reinforcement is one of the most powerful behavioral triggers that exists. It's the same mechanism behind gambling. You don't get rewarded every time. But when you do, it feels enormous. So you keep playing. She's not sitting there, thinking, I'm being manipulated by intermittent attention. She's just feeling the high when he finally responds, feeling the low when he doesn't, and that emotional roller coaster becomes the relationship in her mind. The guy who's steady, he's given her no highs to chase, no lows to recover from, just continuous presence. And continuous presence, while decent and healthy, doesn't trigger the same intensity. It doesn't make her heart race when his name pops up on her phone. It doesn't make her screenshot text to analyze with friends. It doesn't make her question, wonder, or obsess. The harsh truth is this: emotional stability feels boring to someone who hasn't learned to value peace. If her nervous system is wired to drama, to chaos, to highs and lows, then calm will register as emptiness. And the man who creates emotional turbulence, even unintentionally, will feel more alive to her than the man who offers something real. She's not choosing him because he's better for her. She's choosing him because he makes her feel more. And feelings, especially intense ones, override logic every single time. The biggest mistake most men make is thinking transparency builds attraction. It doesn't. Transparency builds trust, and trust is important, but it comes later. In the beginning, what builds attraction is the unknown. It's the unanswered, the undefined. When you lay everything out, when you explain your intentions, your feelings, your past, your plans, you're removing the very thing that keeps her mentally engaged. You're killing the mystery before it even had a chance to work. Women don't fall for what they fully understand right away. They fall for what they're still figuring out. When a man is always talking, always explaining, always making himself crystal clear, he becomes too easy to categorize. She's got him figured out by week 2. And once she's figured you out, the curiosity dies. There's nothing left to discover, no layers to peel back, no depth to explore. You've handed her the entire map before she even wanted to take the journey. Now look at the guy who barely says anything. He's not spilling his life story on the first date. He's not texting paragraphs about how he feels. He's not explaining what last weekend meant or where this is going. He just exists, shows up, says little, leaves. And what does that create? Questions. What's he thinking? What does he do when he's not with me? Is he seeing someone else? Does he even like me? Those questions don't feel like red flags to her in the moment. They feel like intrigue. Her brain starts working overtime trying to crack the code. She's analyzing every word he does say, looking for clues in his tone, searching for meaning in the silence. And all of that mental activity keeps him alive in her head even when he's nowhere around. The guy who over-explains, he's solved the puzzle for her. No mystery, no tension, no reason to keep thinking about him when he's gone. He's just there, comfortable, predictable, nice, and nice doesn't keep someone up at night wondering. Mystery does. The undefined always carries more emotional weight than the obvious. It's why people obsess over someone they barely know and take for granted. The person who's been nothing but clear and present. This doesn't mean you should be vague to manipulate interest. It means you should stop volunteering everything in an attempt to be liked. Stop front loading your emotions to secure her comfort. Stop narrating your internal world because you're afraid silence will be misread. Let her sit in the not knowing. Let her wonder. Let her be curious. When she asks what you did today, you don't need to give a play-by-play. When she hints at defining the relationship, you don't need to rush into clarity just to ease her anxiety. When there's a pause in conversation, you don't need to fill it with noise. The space between words is where imagination lives, and imagination is more powerful than anything you could say, because what she imagines about you will always be more interesting than the full unedited version you're tempted to hand over. Keep some things to yourself, to be shady, but to stay interesting. Effort is only attractive when it's not desperate. The moment your effort starts to feel like convincing, like campaigning for her approval, it stops working. You text her to make sure she's still interested. You call to calm your own nerves. You explain yourself to avoid being misunderstood. And every time you do that, you're communicating one thing loud and clear. You're afraid of losing her. That fear leaks through everything. The tone of your texts, the speed of your replies, the way you adjust your schedule to fit hers. It's not love. It's insecurity dressed up as care. And she can feel the difference even if she can't name it. The guy who barely talks isn't sitting around strategizing his next move. He's not obsessing over when to text or what to say. He's just living, working, training, building something, spending time with people who matter. His world doesn't stop because she hasn't responded in 6 hours. His mood doesn't tank because she seemed distant last night. He's emotionally self-sufficient, and that self-sufficiency is what she's actually responding to. It's not the silence that attracts her, it's what the silence represents. A man who doesn't need her validation to feel okay. A man whose life has momentum with or without her in it. That kind of groundedness can't be faked. You either have a life that matters to you or you don't. And if you don't, no amount of playing it cool will hide that emptiness. When you overcommunicate, you're outsourcing your emotional regulation to her. You need her to reply so you can relax. You need her attention to feel valued. You need constant interaction to believe the connection is real. But that's exhausting for her. It turns her into your emotional support system before she's even decided if she wants to be with you. And nobody wants that burden. The man who isn't always reaching out doesn't place that weight on her. He's fine today whether she texts or not. He'll be fine tomorrow if she doesn't call. That's not coldness, that's strength. And strength is magnetic in ways that neediness will never be. Here's the brutal part. The more you try to prove you're worth keeping, the more you prove you're afraid of being left. Every extra text, every explanation nobody asked for, every attempt to smooth over silence that didn't need smoothing, all of it screams one thing: insecurity. And insecurity repels attraction faster than almost anything. You think you're being considerate by checking in constantly. You think you're showing you care by always being available. But what you're really showing is that you've made her the center of your emotional world. And centers are supposed to be stable, grounded, unshakable. When you make someone else your center, you become the opposite. Reactive, anxious, unstable. The guy who barely engages keeps his center inside himself. His emotions aren't dictated by her responses. His worth isn't up for negotiation based on her mood. He's just solid, and solid beats eager every single time. When you're always initiating, always reaching out, always carrying the conversation, you rob her of the chance to invest. She never has to wonder if you're thinking about her because you've already told her 12 times today. She never has to reach out first because you've beaten her to it every single morning. She never has to put in effort because you've done all the heavy lifting before she even woke up. And here's the problem with that. People don't value what they don't work for. When something is handed to them constantly without any effort on their part, it becomes expected, routine, forgettable. But when they have to reach, when they have to initiate, when they have to wonder and then act on that wondering, suddenly it matters. Suddenly it means something. The guy who's not always available creates that dynamic without even trying. He's not there every second. He's not filling every gap. He's not jumping at every opportunity to prove himself. So when he's absent, she notices. When he's quiet, she feels it. And when she starts feeling that absence, she starts doing something most men never give her the chance to do. She starts investing. She texts first. She suggests plans. She reaches out to make sure she's still on his radar. That's not manipulation. That's natural human behavior. When someone isn't constantly handed to us, we start valuing their presence more. We start making moves to keep them close. But the man who's always present never triggers that response. Why would she reach out when she knows he'll do it anyway? Why would she initiate when he's never given her a moment of silence long enough to feel his absence? This is the part that messes with good men. They think being there all the time shows love. It shows commitment, it shows reliability, and it does, but it also removes tension, it removes mystery, it removes the very dynamic that creates desire in the first place. There's no chase because there's nothing to chase. He's already caught, already given, already fully accessible, so her brain checks the box and moves on to something that requires more mental energy. Investment isn't built through your effort alone, it's built through mutual exchange. When you give endlessly without requiring anything in return, you train her to take without thinking. But when you pull back, when you create room for her to show up, you're testing her interest in the most honest way possible. Does she reach out when you don't? Does she notice when you're quiet? Does she care enough to close the gap? If yes, the connection is real. If no, you just saved yourself months of chasing someone who was never truly in. Either way, space reveals truth faster than words ever could. What women say they want and what actually triggers attraction are often two different things. They'll tell you they want a man who's emotionally available, a man who's present, a man who prioritizes them. And on the surface, that's true. But underneath all of that, What really pulls them in is a man who has something going on that doesn't involve them, a man with direction, a man with purpose, a man whose life feels full even when she's not in it. That's the real magnet, not availability, independence. When your world clearly doesn't revolve around her, it creates something powerful. It signals that your time has value, that your attention is earned, not given away freely, that you have standards for how you spend your energy. And that signal alone separates you from every other guy flooding her inbox with attention she didn't ask for. The man who barely talks usually isn't doing it on purpose. He's just genuinely occupied. His mind is on his work, his goals, his health, his ambitions. He's building something, moving toward something, engaged with something that feeds him outside of any relationship. And because of that, he doesn't have time to be constantly present. His silence isn't strategy. It's a byproduct of focus. And that focus is what she's really attracted to. She's a man who isn't waiting around for her reply. A man who doesn't reorganize his entire week just because she's free on Saturday. A man who exists fully whether she's watching or not. That kind of presence can't be faked. You can't pretend to have a life. You either do or you don't. When you're always available, it sends the opposite message. It tells her you have nothing more important than her attention. That might sound romantic, but it doesn't feel that way to her. It feels like pressure, like you've handed her responsibility for your happiness, like your entire mood depends on whether she responds quickly or not. That weight is not attractive, it's suffocating. The man who's too available becomes easy to predict, easy to manage, easy to take for granted. There's no challenge, no friction, no polarity, just constant sameness that slowly drains the energy from the connection. This is why building a life matters more than learning tactics. When you have purpose, when your days are structured around growth, when you're genuinely excited about your own path, your energy shifts. You stop needing constant validation because you're getting fulfillment from within. You stop chasing attention because you're already engaged with things that matter, and that inner fullness radiates outward. She feels it, she sees it, she respects it. Even if she never admits it out loud, she's drawn to the man who wouldn't fall apart without her. The man who'd miss her, sure, but who'd keep moving regardless. That's what real confidence looks like, not arrogance, not indifference. Just a quiet knowing that your life is valuable with or without anyone else's presence in it. The person who needs the relationship less holds the power. That's not cynical. That's just how dynamics work. When you're chasing, pursuing, constantly trying to lock things down, you've already handed over control, you've made her the prize and yourself the contestant, and from that position, everything you do feels like auditioning, like convincing, like hoping she picks you instead of the next guy. That energy is felt immediately. It shifts the entire dynamic in her favor before anything real has even started. The man who doesn't chase isn't playing a game. He's operating from a different foundation entirely. He's not trying to secure an outcome. He's not trying to prevent loss. He's simply moving through life with his own direction and allowing others to join if they want. That posture changes everything. Suddenly, she's not being pursued, she's being invited, and invitations feel different than pressure. Invitations leave room for choice. Pressure creates resistance. When you stop chasing, something interesting happens. She starts wondering where she stands. She starts questioning if you're really interested. She starts reaching out to confirm what she thought she knew. And in that reversal, the entire frame shifts. You're no longer proving yourself. She's now investing effort to keep your attention. Most men are terrified of this. They think if they stop chasing, she'll disappear, and sometimes she will. But here's what they miss. If she disappears because you stop performing constant interest, she was never really in. You were just entertaining her until something more exciting showed up. Putting back reveals that truth faster than months of wasted effort ever could. The man who holds his frame isn't afraid of that revelation. He welcomes it. He'd rather know early than invest endlessly in someone who was never truly committed. This isn't about being cold or playing hard to get. It's about having standards that require reciprocity. When you don't chase, you're communicating something important, that you expect effort in return, that you're not interested in one-sided dynamics, that your attention has conditions, not arrogant conditions, just healthy ones. You show up when she shows up. You invest when she invests. You match energy instead of overcompensating for her lack of it. That balance creates respect, and respect is the foundation desire stands on. Chasing communicates fear. fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of losing something you never really had, and fear is repellent. It makes every gesture feel transactional, every compliment feel desperate, every attempt to connect feel like negotiation. The man who doesn't chase has already made peace with uncertainty. He's already accepted that things might not work out, and that acceptance frees him from the anxiety that drives most men to pursue too hard too fast. He's grounded, centered, unmoved by the possibility of loss. And that stillness, that calm refusal to scramble for validation, is what ultimately draws her closer than any pursuit ever could. The shift happens when you stop needing her to feel complete, when her reply doesn't determine your mood, when her presence doesn't define your worth, when her attention isn't the metric you use to measure whether today was good or not. That's when everything changes, not because you become cold or detached, but because you finally built a foundation inside yourself that doesn't crumble when external validation disappears. Most men never reach this place. They spend years tying their emotional state to someone else's behavior, happy when she's engaged, anxious when she's distant, devastated when she pulls away. Their entire inner world rises and falls based on how she's showing up that day. And that dependence, no matter how well hidden, destroys attraction over time. The man who doesn't need validation isn't pretending not to care. He genuinely enjoys her company when she's around. He appreciates the connection. He values the moments they share. But when she's not there, his life continues. His purpose doesn't pause. His happiness doesn't freeze. He keeps building, keeps growing, keeps moving forward on his own path. That ability to remain whole, regardless of her presence, is what separates him from everyone else. She feels that solidity. She senses that he's not hanging on her every move, and paradoxically, that makes her want to move closer. When you reach this state, you stop overanalyzing everything. You stop reading into response times. You stop interpreting tone shifts like they're coded messages. You just let things unfold without gripping tightly to every moment. That relaxation is magnetic. It removes the pressure that usually suffocates new connections. She doesn't feel like she's being watched, measured, evaluated. She feels like she's with someone who's genuinely at ease, and ease creates safety. Safety creates openness. Openness creates deeper connection. This isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't care about the outcome. It's about widening your sense of self so that one person's behavior doesn't shake your entire identity. When you've built a life that genuinely matters to you, when you have goals that excite you, friendships that fulfill you, growth that challenges you, romantic attention becomes an addition rather than a requirement. You're not starving for it. You're not desperate for it. You're open to it, but not dependent on it. That distinction changes how you carry yourself in every interaction. Women recognize this immediately, even if they can't articulate what they're sensing. There's a different energy behind a man who's operating from abundance versus a man who's operating from scarcity. The abundant man doesn't over-communicate because he doesn't need reassurance. He doesn't chase because he's not afraid of loss. He doesn't perform because he's already enough without her applause. That inner security doesn't come from arrogance or success or external achievement. It comes from knowing who you are and refusing to abandon that for anyone's approval. When you stop needing her to validate your existence, you finally become the kind of man she can't stop thinking about. The final piece isn't about changing your texting habits or learning when to pull back. It's about relocating your emotional center. Most men live with their center outside themselves. It's in her responses, her moods, her interest level, her approval. When she's warm, they're confident. When she's cold, they panic. That's not strength. That's dependency with extra steps. The breakthrough comes when you pull that center back inside. When your sense of stability lives in your own chest, not in someone else's behavior. Once that shift happens, everything recalibrates naturally. You're not strategizing anymore. You're not calculating when to text or how long to wait. You're just living from a grounded place and letting your actions flow from that groundedness instead of from fear. A man with his center intact doesn't need to monitor every interaction for signs of interest or disinterest. He's not dissecting conversations looking for hidden meaning. He's not refreshing his phone hoping for a notification that'll make him feel better. He's just present with his own life, working on what matters, spending time with people who add value, building toward goals that excite him. And when he does engage with her, it's clean, no hidden agenda, no emotional debt being created. No manipulation disguised as mystery, just honest presence followed by honest absence. That rhythm is felt. It communicates self-respect without saying a word. Women immediately sense when they're dealing with a man who's whole versus a man who's fragmented. The whole man doesn't change based on her energy. He's the same whether she's excited or distant, whether she replies in 5 minutes or 5 hours, whether she's leaning in or pulling back. That consistency over time builds something most men never achieve. Trust, not trust that he'll never leave. Trust that he won't lose himself trying to keep her. And that kind of trust is rare. Rare enough that it stands out in a world full of men who collapse at the first sign of uncertainty. This is where you stop being just another option and become someone she thinks about differently. Not because you played games, not because you withheld attention to create scarcity, but because you genuinely didn't need her validation to feel like a man. You were already solid, already moving, already living with intention. She either fits into that or she doesn't. And if she doesn't, you're still whole. That's the shift that changes everything. You stop fearing loss because loss doesn't define you anymore. You stop chasing outcomes because the outcome isn't your identity. You stop performing because you've already accepted yourself fully. If this hit different, subscribe. There's more truth coming that most people won't say out loud. The kind that makes you uncomfortable before it sets you free. When you finally stop outsourcing your worth to someone else's attention, you become the kind of man people remember long after the conversation ends. Not because you were loud, because you were unshakable. That's the power, that's the difference. That's what actually creates lasting attraction. Stay grounded, keep building, and let the rest fall into place.